Welcome back to Stephen A. Smith Show. Now let's get to the latest on Sean Diddy Combs, whose federal trial on sex trafficking and racketeering charges is set to begin next month. Sources tell People magazine that Cassandra Cassie Ventura is prepared to testify against her ex-partner, Diddy, at the upcoming trial using her name. Last Friday, prosecutors filed a motion stating that, quote, victim number one would not be testifying anonymously during Combs' upcoming trial, where he faces charges of racketeering and conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. People magazine exclusively confirmed with sources that Ventura is victim number one, or victim one, and that she will be testifying in the trial. Meanwhile, 3 other victims are preparing to testify anonymously against the disgraced musician. Listen, in recent news, we've seen a lot of things come to the fold. We've seen charges being dropped by other folks, things going away, but this hasn't. And to me, this is why this is so incredibly damaging for Diddy, because the one person that visually incriminates him more than anything else is Cassie Ventura, his ex-girlfriend. She is the person he was seen in that video, that he ran down the hallway half naked, grabbed her, yanked her, threw her to the floor, kicked her, threw a vase at her. The behavior was despicable, and it's incredibly incriminating. To me, if you're the prosecution and you can use that video to smear P. Diddy, that's bad. That's very, very bad. Now, I understand that some people will sit up there and say, racketeering and all of this other stuff that, the charges that have been leveled against him, how much this may have to do with that remains to be seen. But these are 12 jurors we're talking about, jurors of your peers. And if you have an opportunity to visualize a heinous act on the part of the defendant, then that's not going to garner sympathy. It's not going to garner neutrality. It's not going to garner the kind of emotion that one would surmise you would need from a jury in order for you to win your case and ultimately get off with a not guilty verdict and able to go home. I don't know if that's possible once you see that video of him putting his hands on Cassie Ventura. And for her to be the one to testify, and for her to be the one testifying on behalf of the prosecution, considering the fact that she was his lady, considering the fact that reportedly, she engaged in activities she otherwise would not have wanted to at the behest of him. When you consider some of the things that they're saying about him, and the fact that your ex-girl, with all the evidence in the world to come at you, one would surmise, is willing to do so for the prosecution. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not good. That's very, very bad. That's very bad. I mean, I just don't know what to say about it. I really, really don't. Because, again, I'm not trying to convict a brother in the court of public opinion, nor am I trying to let him off. I'm trying to let the facts bear themselves out. But with the litany of charges and allegations that have been thrown in his direction, I can't imagine anything more incriminating than her. She's the last person that I would have expected to testify on behalf of the prosecution. I thought somehow, some way, Diddy and his defense team would have prevented that part from happening. That's not going to happen. And think about it, whatever they ask, ladies and gentlemen, just pause for a second. Just close your eyes for a second. And just imagine that when your eyes were open just a few seconds earlier, you saw that video in the Intercontinental Hotel, I believe that's where it was, in L.A., where he's running down the hallway half naked. He grabs her, he yanks her to the floor. She lays helpless on the ground. He kicks her, he shoves her, he throws a vase at her. He drags her down the hallway. He does all of this stuff. The hotel clearly had the video. They held on for it for quite some time because it happened years ago. And yet somehow, some way, it didn't come to light until this. And then you're showing that to jurors? Jurors see this? After that, every question they ask her, they're going to believe her before they believe him. They can even play the video of him on social media, looking disheveled and contrite and saying that he was real messed up. He was in a messed up place. He had a lot going on. You see it right there? There it is. That's him on social media. Of his own volition, putting that post out. He's in no position to refute what she says, especially if they confine their questions to her personal experiences. Like if they ask her dates and times and stuff like that, and they could try to get her caught up in all of that, and she gives the wrong answers, yeah, that could be incriminating. But if they're asking her about what she felt like, how terrorized she felt, what the fear factor was like, these are things that you can't police. And it all impacts the jury. This is why I say he's in trouble. It's not just because of the litany of charges. It's not just because it's being brought by the Southern District of New York. It's not just because of those things. It's because the person or people who are incriminating him, especially as it pertains to her specifically, it's not going to be hard for her to be very convincing. It just isn't. Those are my thoughts. As minimal as they may be in significance. But my next guest, that's not a problem he has. Joining me to discuss this is ESPN and ABC News legal analyst, one of the best in the business, I might add. He's also a Sports Center anchor as well, the one and only Ryan Smith, my colleague. What's going on, buddy? How you doing, man? How's everything?
Everything's good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. Let's get right to it. You heard me talking about Diddy a little bit earlier. His trial date starts on May 5th. What's the significance of Cassandra Cassie Ventura testifying under her real name instead of anonymously like three other people named in the indictment?
Yeah, this could be huge in a couple different ways. And let's break it down between symbolically and legally. Symbolically, for me, this is huge because it lends credibility to her testimony. So you think about it like this. Cassie gets up on the stand, she's naming herself, and for jurors, and even in the court of public opinion, there's this sense that she's standing behind her allegations full throttle using her name. Now, that's nothing against other accusers who might not be willing to use their names. It's just that how we tend to look at things, especially how juries might tend to look at things. They might say, well, this person's standing behind what they're saying, so we're going to back her a little bit more. We might believe her a little bit more, and it lends credibility to her allegations. The other thing is putting her name out there, and I know it's been out there in some connections in many ways so far, it also helps others possibly come forward. Prosecutors always talked about how this case might not be done. There might be other factors, and that could still be a possibility. Legally, I think it's twofold. Number one, it's showing of strength for the prosecution. We are here. We are naming ourselves. We are out there. Come at us. The other thing I think that's critical here is it puts the defense on the defensive. Here's why. She gets up on the stand. She names herself. She's got the credibility. Jurors are connecting with her. It might make it harder for them to try to discredit her or intimidate her or come at her really hard on cross-examination. So those are some factors that play into all this. And I think for the prosecution, it's a win to have her naming herself.
Let's look at the specificity of the actual charges against Diddy. When you talk about her name, instead of being anonymous, her name being put out there, specifically, what can she speak to? I'm talking about the actual specifications of the charges against him. How can she specifically speak against that? We heard the words racketeering, for crying out loud. What would she have to do with that? Explain that to my viewers.
My biggest thing is she's going to try to explain what happened at these freak-offs, and that's going to be huge. I think people tend to look at legal trials and they say, well, this person's going to give us the smoking gun. This person's going to tell us the one thing that's connect everything. But racketeering cases are a vast thing that you have to build. So you have to show through the different witnesses, through the different evidence, all the different things you have, that there was a criminal enterprise going on in furtherance of these activities, in furtherance, in this case, of these assaults, of these different things in terms of prostitution, the allegations they're making. So you have to build that case. And I think what Cassie can do is, we've all seen the video, and there's been a lot of connections to her in that video. But this goes beyond that. This is her being able to frame what the situation was like for Diddy, what some of these events were like, so they can use her testimony along with the evidence they have to prove the racketeering.
But Ryan, when we talk about that, and I just playing devil's advocate for a second, Diddy, in all likelihood, one would surmise, would say she was consensual in these actions, okay? she wasn't forced, etc. His proof could be the fact that they were in a relationship for years. So if he was so reprehensible, such an insidious figure, why was she involved with him for so long? What defense do you anticipate he'll be able to make that he has a snowball's chance, and you know what, of making against her, particularly when she's the one we saw him hit and kick on a video?
That's the defense. He's going to say she was consensual. He's going to say all the people involved, everybody the prosecution was bringing in, was all consensual, that people did this because they liked it. They wanted to be there. But prosecutors, you got to look at it in terms of the way prosecutors are trying to build their case. They're building it in the same way or in a similar way that the Weinstein case was built. This is a person in power, a gatekeeper to certain things in this industry. If you wanted to get into this industry in certain ways, you had to do the things he said. And this was how he did it. And these are the things these people had to do. I think you make a great point that they were in a relationship, that might be part of what they might use. But my sense is that, and we don't know all of the prosecution's case, my sense is that they're going to build this and say, she was in that relationship, but just because you're in a relationship doesn't mean that person gets to control you and make you do certain things. And perhaps there was a point where he was doing this and doing things that she felt like she had to do in order to not only further her career, but in order to be a part of this world. And I think that's one way in which prosecutors are going to try to build this case. They're going to try to build similarities among Cassie and other people that might testify and other people that are contributing to this case to say, this was a pattern. These were the things he did in order to continue this criminal enterprise.
But if she's willing to put her name on Front Street instead of being anonymous, and others refrain from doing so, won't that diminish potentially their argument against Diddy, the anonymous ones?
I love that you asked that question, because that's a common thing that people ask when you talk about one person revealing their name and others not. And you make a great point, because in some ways it looks like, well, they're not willing to stand behind their claims. So how can we believe their claims? What the judge and what others are going to have to decide in this case, and what probably will play out a little bit, is the reason why people are trying to remain anonymous here. Cassie is a well-known public figure. She was also connected in that initial videotape. We know that she is a part of this, anybody who knows anything about this case. So in many ways, it's amazing that she's still coming forward and offering herself out there like this, with all the public scrutiny that she might face, with the harassment she might face. But Stephen A., look at it from the other people's perspective. Are they supposed to be in a place where they're supposed to deal with the harassment and the public scrutiny? I think it becomes hard for people sometimes to realize that people who are accusers in cases like this, they come forward with their story, and as painful as that is, there becomes the aftermath of sharing the story. They're harassed online. People get their address. They try to find them. The complaints the accusations dog them for most of their lives. How does that affect their ability to get a job? How does that affect their ability to live in society? So I think it's incredibly brave that Cassie's able to come forward and use her name, but she's also a public figure, and she's been accustomed to that scrutiny a little bit. I think what will help the other accusers is they might not be as famous, maybe not as accustomed, and maybe it'll be easier for the prosecution to say to jurors, hey, look, they don't have the public profile that she does. Let's try to hear their words and respect their privacy.
The word anonymous, and I'm going to go off the subject in a second, but the word anonymous, a lot of people don't realize what that means. It just says, okay, you don't know the meaning, the public. But those who will testify against Diddy anonymously, does Diddy and his defense team know specifically who they are? Do they know their names, etc.? Can you explain that to my audience?
Yeah, they'll know their names. Discovery should have all come out. A lot of that information should come out unless there's some sort of play by the prosecutor to try to restrict that access because there's some concern about harassment or that they can be threatened. But in theory, the way this should work is they should have a right to confront their accusers. They should have a right to know their names, background on them, and that's part of what they're going to try to use to discredit their story. So, but the naming anonymous ends up being significant in a case like this because you mentioned it. Once you put Cassie's name out on Front Street, everybody's going to hear about it. We're going to be waiting for the testimony. We're going to be trying to figure out what she said. She's going to probably have to do press conferences, possibly at some point speak. Are the other people signing up for that in order to share what happened to them? And I think that's the critical part of leaving their names anonymous. In that courtroom, that stuff is supposed to be confidential and allows them to go ahead and live their lives while also sharing their truth as the prosecution needs them to build their case.
The video that Diddy put out on social media where he appeared contrite and disheveled, those are the words that I used, basically saying he was effed up. He was in a very, very bad place when he did what he did to Cassie Ventura. You see the video right there. How incriminating could that end up being against him now that Cassie has been willing to attach her name to the lawsuit, and she's going to come out on Front Street and say whatever it is that she has to say?
It could be a very big problem for him because prosecutors are going to pull up that videotape. They're going to put it out there in court and they're going to say, look at what this man said. He is sorry for what he did. Folks, let's outline for you now what he did. Cassie, let's get on the stand and outline for us what he did. And coupled with our evidence, that's going to prove our case. So typically, when you have a situation like that, your lawyers will tell you, if you're representing Diddy, hey, don't say anything. I know there's a temptation to do that. Don't say anything because it can be used against you. I think in Diddy's mind, it's a way to get public sympathy. It's a way to get, and I think in some ways his defense team can say about this, hey, he's apologizing for the relationship. He is not a perfect person, but he is not a criminal. That's going to be their messaging. But still, you don't want to have a videotape out there from your client saying, I'm sorry for what I did, giving the prosecution the ability to explore that. And with their evidence, with Cassie and with other witnesses, to be able to prove, yeah, you're sorry for what you did because it was criminal. That's what prosecutors are going to want to do.
Knowing the law, knowing criminal cases the way that you do, what does this case eerily remind you of as it pertains to other cases that may have existed out there in the past? When you think about what P. Diddy is going through right now, what's the comparison you draw it to?
My biggest comparison is the Weinstein case, also the R. Kelly case. Both of those cases involved a situation where prosecutors were able to build it as you have a gatekeeper and it's impossible to really make inroads in this area without the gatekeeper. And I know people are going to hear that and say, well, all of these people, they could have, Diddy is doing this, they could have gone to Dre or somebody else. And you know, there's a million other rap artists and production companies out there. But I think what they're trying to build in the same way that it was built in the Weinstein case was he wasn't the only studio in town. Miramax wasn't the only place to make films, but in a particular way, once you got in this world, there was a way to build your career, to foster development. And I think what this case draws a similarity to, and what prosecutors have been trying to do with these cases, is show no one is above the law. You can't go out, in prosecutors' mind, create a business and then make people do your bidding, even if it's illegal, in order to move up in that business, if it's a legitimate business. You can't do that. And so in the same way that the Weinstein case was prosecuted and the R. Kelly case was prosecuted, it feels like prosecutors are following the similar playbook here, trying to make that point not only publicly, but also in the courtroom. These are criminal enterprises that in many ways were set up in furtherance of Diddy and the people with him, and at the expense of these, in their minds, accusers and victims.
We use words, last question on this matter, we use words like criminal enterprise, we use words like racketeering and what have you. Is it wrong for us to get the impression that it's not Diddy that they're after? They're after him, of course, please don't get me wrong, but it's not just him. They're after a whole string of individuals that he's connected to, as opposed to it just being, it was about R. Kelly. It was about Harvey Weinstein. It doesn't appear to be thereafter just Diddy. It's like he's the guy to get, so all the dominoes will fall and we'll get everybody associated with it. That's the impression that I'm getting. To that you say what, Ryan Smith?
Yeah, I say I completely agree. And I say I would go beyond that. The first thing is, you're absolutely right. They're trying to get him and the enterprise and everything that backed him and everything that created this enterprise, because that's what they try to do when they prosecute criminal cases. I know that people out there say, hey, this is just about Diddy. It's not just about Diddy. It's about trying to uphold the law. That's how prosecutors see it. But the way I go beyond it is this. With each one of these cases, they are trying to send a message, not just to the Diddys of the world or to the Harvey Weinstein or R. Kellys. They're trying to send a message to the people who have other things going on, or people who might come up later, who might have ideas of doing something that they're saying Diddy did. They're saying, we will find you. We will come after you. The fact that Diddy is there in the courtroom, perhaps he is telling us things about you, about people you know. So if you're doing something on the wrong side of the law and you think your power and your money and influence is going to protect you, it will not. And that's the message they're trying to send. We obviously, Stephen A., we talk about this case. We have to see how it's litigated and how everything comes out. But for prosecutors, This is every success they have in this area is another ability for them to be able to say to everybody else out there in all of these businesses, you are not above the law, no matter how much money or power you have.